Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-around good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Whoa! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion each and every week. And this week on the show, it's just coming on the heels of the tragic loss of James Earl Jones. We have lost another Star Wars legend earlier this week. We heard about the passing of the late Robert Watts, longtime producer for Star Wars, Indiana Jones, many fantastic film franchises. So we're going to be remembering him on the show. We have a really old interview that Dominic did with him 8 years ago that we're going to be digging out of the closet for y'all to listen to. And we're going to be talking about Robert and examining his impact on the legacy of Star Wars. And as always, later in the show, we will be getting to your hashtag Ask the SWU questions and super chats. So stick around for that. My name is Chris. Joining me is my good friend, Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Good to be back, and not good to be celebrating the life of another legend that we lost recently. The hits have been coming very rapidly recently. A lot of really awesome and very famous people that have touched a lot of people's lives have been passing away. And just like in the past week, which is just nuts. It seems like they happen all at once. But even for Star Wars, earlier this year we had Carl Weathers, and then we had James Earl Jones, and now the great Robert Watts who will be, I think, someone who I think some people may not actually know that much about. I feel like I think you would not be remiss to be like a hardcore Star Wars fan and be like, I've heard his name, but I'm not really sure what he's done or what his impact on Star Wars was. So hopefully we'll do a little bit of backtracking and celebrate his achievements and accomplishments, because not just Star Wars, but Indiana Jones, a bunch of other movies, really accomplished guy. And very, very sorry to see him go. But yeah, really, really looking forward to looking back at his career.
Yeah, definitely. Also joining us all the way from the Raeside, it's Hannah.
G'day there. Yeah, absolutely showing the exact same sentiment as Ben. A sad time, but also one to celebrate the great works of a great person. But yeah, can't wait to discuss all things in between all this news. Lots of interesting rumors going around that I'm not sure how much we'll get to today, but can't wait to talk it all out.
That's right. So real quick to plug, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. You can super chat with us if you're watching live. Another way you can support us if you're watching later is by becoming a channel member, getting a monthly subscription. And please also subscribe if you found us on a podcast app. And you can check out our Discord. The link is in the description of this video of this podcast. And you can follow us on social media at the SWU. And after you're finished watching this show, consider checking out some of the other great programming we have on the Star Wars Underworld Network, including the Raeside, Iron Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. You can find the Raeside and Tales from Beyond the Galaxy on their own channels, and Ion Cannon and Tractor Beam right here on the Star Wars Underworld Network channel. All right, Ben, let's get
Yeah.
into the news, and we'll start with our very unfortunate top story.
Right. So, as mentioned off the top, fortunately, the great producer Robert Watts passed away earlier this week at the age of 86. He has a big impact on Star Wars. He was, a producer, co-producer, and on all three of the original Star Wars films. Not only that, was heavily involved on things. He was production manager on A New Hope originally, associate producer on Empire Strikes Back, and co-producer on Return of the Jedi. I want to make sure I actually get those right. And he was also he played one of the ATST drivers. The dudes that get pulled out of the ATST. That is Richard Marquand and Robert Watts. In the tank, they get. I'm sure they're not. I think it was stunt guys actually get pulled out and thrown by Chewbacca, but they're the guys that are in there like, what's going on? And because they had that originally, I read that they were going to get General Veers back for that. They were going to get Julian Glover to play those roles, but Robert Watts and Richard Marquand stepped in to fill that spot late in the game, and so you may not even known it was this, very influential co-producer was actually on screen all these years. And then he went on to do, a lot with Indiana Jones, producer on that, and then worked on Who Framed Roger Rabbit and so many other movies. And as you'll hear later, he's done a lot of talking over the years, been to a lot of fan events and talked to fans about his career. And also, this is a fun fact, and it kind of ties into another very sad loss that we had a few years ago. He was the half brother of Mr. Jeremy Bulloch, and he is basically the reason Jeremy Bulloch is in Star Wars, because I can't remember exactly the story, but basically, maybe he'll tell the story in thing. I'm sure Dom and him will get to that in this 8-year-old interview that we're about to play for you guys. But it's apparently it was a last minute thing with Jeremy Bulloch, and the actor, I guess, didn't show up, and he's like, hey, my half brother could fit in that suit, and the rest is history. So now we had the immense pleasure to have the wonderful Jeremy Bulloch as part of our community too, thanks to that. So amazing stuff. But yeah, any thoughts on Robert Watts, guys?
Is Willie his nickname? Willie Watts.
Willie Watts, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because in Hollywood, obviously, filmmaking is such an incredibly creative act, and so there's a lot of celebration with the media, with marketing, with the Oscars about the most creative roles in production. And that's why directors and writers and actors are so well-known household names, but there's so much more involved in a film production and any other type of production than just the pure creative side of things. There's a lot of logistics and management that are required, and big film sets are some of the hardest things to manage on the planet. And yet, because it's not something that is specifically creative and in the artistic way that we tend to define it culturally, we don't tend to know the names or kind of give as much praise or accolades. Yes, I want that show to come back. Accolades to the people that do it. So Robert Watts is one of those people who is like the person that's like literally making the Star Wars, like literally doing the kind of menial day-to-day operational tasks of getting things done. So for example, he was the production manager on A New Hope and the original Star Wars film. And one of the reasons why George Lucas entrusted him with this is because he was the production manager. His first job as production manager was for Stanley Kubrick on A Space Odyssey. Wow. And if anyone knows anything about kind of the filmy side of film, they know that Stanley Kubrick is the probably one of the most difficult directors to work for, because Stanley Kubrick is so incredibly meticulous about everything. We'll shoot a scene 100 times just to make sure somebody's eyebrow twitch is right or something like that. And so going through the ringer of directing a Stanley Kubrick film, let alone one of the most, if not the most famous Stanley Kubrick films, surely was a great resume. And it is not a surprise that George Lucas entrusted him with Star Wars. So imagine that you're all the people on the set of Star Wars. You're out in the desert of Africa, and you're about to shoot a movie, and then there's just a massive sandstorm that comes rolling through that's ready to just absolutely destroy everything and put countless people's lives in danger. Something people don't think about a lot is who actually has to deal with that problem. Like, who does that fall on to deal with? Is it George Lucas? Is it Anthony Daniels? No, it's the manager. It's the production manager who has to actually figure out how to handle that situation. So Robert Watts is the person who actually had to make the calls of how do we get through this situation and get this movie made and get all our stuff safe and all our people safe when there's a massive sandstorm coming in and a massive natural disaster happening on our filming location. And he was the one that was able to figure out how to get them through that situation and get all that stuff done. So that's incredible. And it's unfortunate that stories like that aren't told as much in mass media, and award shows and things like that, because they're not as flashy and glamorous as, oh, this guy's the voice of Darth Vader, this guy's the director who came up with the idea for the franchise. I mean, those are amazing things too, don't get me wrong, but it is unfortunate that we don't kind of give that same praise to people like Robert Watts, who are like the managers who actually go and get that stuff done logistically, and manage the whole set. And so that's why he's so important to Star Wars. That's why he's so important to Indiana Jones. I mean, I'll add one little bit about Indiana Jones, since that's so close to the Star Wars franchise as well. And I'm sure people will enjoy hearing it. Imagine that, Spielberg or Lucas is coming to you and saying, so we're going to have a scene with Harrison. And, we have this bit where, Harrison's afraid of snakes. So, can you get like 7,000 snakes? Like so many snakes that when we film a shot of Harrison, all you see is him and snakes. There's nothing else. Can you do that for me? That's the guy that they call is Robert Watts. That's the guy that they tell that to. And then it's Robert Watts. It's his responsibility to go and figure out how to actually go and find 7,000 snakes and then get them safely transported to a closed film set, Elstree Studios, and then actually film a scene with a bunch of crew and lighting and electricity and actors who are worth $1 billion now, and get all of that done just because some creative person was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if there were 7,000 snakes in this shot. That's what he did. He figured out how to do that. So I'm sure there's countless stories about this. I'm sure him and Dom will talk about some of these things, but it's cool. It's unfortunate sometimes we have to wait for someone to pass away for these things to actually be discussed, because they're pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many unsung heroes in any production, but especially Star Wars. Star Wars is arguably one of the most studied productions. Any of these movies are most studied productions ever in the history of film. And even in that space, we know, like, okay, yeah, George, we love John Williams, and even down the line, like, we love people like Doug Chiang, John Knoll, Gary Kurtz. Like, we know those names. But it takes a team. Movies, like, people don't realize, like, there's a reason, movies making a movie is hard. There's a reason why rarely do you are they good? Are they really actually good? Because, if it was easy to make a good movie, everyone would just do it. It's not. It's a very hard process. Even making a bad movie is really hard. And, and so I think bringing him along and, like, understanding, like, this is a business, And somebody's got to do that grunt work and manage all this stuff. So the director can come on set and go, you go here and you go here, whatever else. I think one story I heard that, like the snake scene, like the Well of Souls, like I think they brought in snakes and they're like, nah, it's not enough snakes. Bring in more snake. Get more snakes. And it's just like, come on, man. Can you imagine? God. Like you do your job. You're like, I've got the snakes, guys. They're here. And then they're like, no, not enough. Not enough. You got like 1,000. No, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So good.
Imagine you're like Robert Watts and you're like, do you guys think that we just go out and like catch these outside? Like, you think there's like 1,000 of these outside that we could just go and grab and get for you in like 2 hours? Like, no, I gotta like, call up like Hong Kong and like, we gotta get them like on a plane here. And
it's insane.
That's actually what spawned the idea for Snakes on a Plane, was birds still trying to transport them all to the Indiana Jones.
Inspired by true events.
I'm sure some of them were on a plane.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I echo a lot of again, just what you both have said, of a lot of what we see and connect with as a story just cannot happen with someone like Robert. And I think it's I totally agree, Chris. It is kind of sad that we have to wait for someone's passing to really celebrate them, and everything that they did. But what a guy.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we can say though that prior to his passing, we did interview him, which is awesome. Dom ran into him and talked with him for a good while 8 years ago. So we're gonna pull up that right now, and Dom has a little intro that he's gonna do to it as well, and share his thoughts.
Well, hello everybody. Dominic here. I am so sorry I could not be here this week, but I did want to drop in for just a minute and talk about Robert Watts before we replay the interview that I did with him about 8 years ago. I was fortunate to cross paths with Robert. It was just the one time. You're going to hear that meeting, that conversation in just a moment. But even from our one meeting, you could tell that you were meeting somebody special, that you had encountered one of the great people of this earth, who is both incredibly good at what he does and incredibly kind at his core. Because this was a long time ago. We were pretty early in our days as podcasters, hadn't done a ton of stuff, and he still gave me 40 minutes of his time while he was in Toronto. He was in Toronto both to like speak at an event, but also he was there just being a movie producer. He was there securing funding for a new project. That's what he was really there for. And he took time out of his day just to reflect on Star Wars, to chat with me about all the incredible things that he had done. And I'll tell you, when I met him, I met him at his hotel in downtown Toronto. I was going to meet him in the lobby, and we were going to just do the interview there. And when I got there, he was wrapping up speaking with another outlet. So I was just kind of like waiting around. They finish up, and he says goodbye to the other interviewer, and he comes over to me. He says, "Oh, hello. Are you who I'm who's interviewing me next?" And I said, "Yeah." And we sort of chatted for a moment. And I introduced myself, told him a little bit about the podcast, and he's sitting there listening, and he goes, "You know what? I'd like a beer. Would you like a beer? I think we should get a beer." And I said, "Sure." It was like noon, which is 5 o'clock in England, which is where he's from. So why not? Let's go for it. Let's have a beer with the producer of Star Wars. Why not? So we go to the hotel bar, which is where we wind up recording the interview from. And so you'll hear in the interview, there's kind of like a jazzy jazzy soundtrack to it. That is just what was playing in this sort of fancy hotel bar that we're sitting in. And we sit down, we're having a beer. He's already telling stories, already talking about, I mentioned, Star Wars Underworld, we love Boba Fett. He's already talking about how he got Jeremy Bullock the job back in the day. And then we hit record on the interview. And I was recording with this little handheld recorder. We didn't have our own microphones or anything. And this is how much how generous he was with his time, how much he spoke. There were several points where I'm holding the microphone up to him. I'm holding this little recorder up to him that he's speaking into. And he's been talking for so long, just giving these really detailed and interesting answers. And I don't want to cut him off, but my arm is like shaking because I've been holding it up for so long. And his assistant a couple of times like sort of reached in there and gave me a little bit of a boost to like keep my arm from falling off as we recorded this interview. But we talked for 40 minutes. We talked about Star Wars of the past. We talked about, he had some thoughts on Star Wars of the present at that time, with Force Awakens had just come out. We talked a little bit about Rogue One. We talked about the Rogue One reshoots, if you can believe it. This was 2016. That's what was on people's minds. And so I asked him about it. I'm like, let's ask somebody who's been there to comment on it. And, the comments and the conclusions that we reached, I don't know if they necessarily wound up reflecting the reality of that situation, but we were basing it on the press reports of the time. So this is also like a little bit of a time capsule in that way. But what I came away from it was, and we wrap up the interview, which again, it's like 40 minutes long, and he just keeps going afterwards. We're just sitting around chatting, and he's again, very kind, very generous person, wanted to know about the podcast, wanted to know about what I was doing, and just seemed really kind and really genuine. And so it truly, when I look back on the great moments of this podcast and the great experiences that have come for me on like a personal level, this is like a top 5, top 3 moment. It was truly, truly something special. He was an incredible person, and you're going to hear that in this interview. So rest in peace, Robert. It's terribly, terribly sad to lose you. Your thoughts are absolutely with your friends and family, but I'm eternally grateful for this afternoon that you gave me, this like core memory for me, and this tremendous interview that everybody's about to hear. So without further ado, let's turn the clock back to 2016 and hear from Star Wars producer, the late great Robert Watts. Enjoy. All right, Star Wars fans, I am now so excited to be joined by a man who possibly has one of the most impressive resumes of all time. Let's run down some of the films he's worked on. Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that man is Robert Watts. And I'm so excited to be joined by him. Robert, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk to me today.
My pleasure, Dominic. Anything you want to know, I'll do my best to tell you.
Well, first, like when you look back on a resume like that, that includes not only all the Star Wars movies, or the original Star Wars movies, the original Indiana Jones movies in 2001, are you aware of like how much that has impacted not only cinema but audiences everywhere? Do you get to enjoy those films as well?
I really enjoyed them. And it's brilliant that they are so enjoyed by so many people, because that's what we set out to do. When you make entertainment, you're supposed to be entertaining people. And the last thing I ever want to make is a boring movie. And, with Star Wars, it was just something extraordinary that George put together there. 20th Century Fox at the time didn't believe in it at all, and gave us a terrible hard time while we were making it. And when it opened, their price on Wall Street doubled. So we showed it, but look, it's still going on. They're shooting one right now, a new one.
Yeah, they're working on Rogue One right now. And do you follow the new movies at all? Do you follow? Did you see The Force Awakens? Do you maybe see the trailers for the new movies as they're coming out?
Oh yes, indeed. I visited the set of The Force Awakens, met J.J. Abrams, who I think did a very good job on that, and it was really nice to meet him. Because I walked on the set with Norman Reynolds, who was the designer on those early Star Wars. And all these crew people came out and go, oh, could I have your autograph? Oh, you're legends. So I go, what are you talking about? Because we'd worked on the first Star Wars. Even J.J. Abrams had a side a poster from the first film.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. That it just shows, I mean, the impact of those movies, that, you know, the people who are now making things in Hollywood and are making the biggest movies. I mean, Force Awakens, huge. They were inspired by you guys, and so yeah, you guys are legends to them and to people like me.
Yeah, I find that kind of weird because I don't feel like a legend. We all did our jobs, but it's, you know, George Lucas came up with the whole concept. We facilitated that. We didn't come in and say, "Oi, George, I think you should do this, this, and this in terms of changing the thing." No, our contribution could well be that it would be better if this looked a bit like that because it would be easier to operate, and we had to run it. And at the time, 20th Century Fox, who didn't really believe in it too much, put those of us who were on it had done big films, because George Lucas never had done a big film. So, you know, like John Barry, the production designer, myself, the editor, all these people had done big films. And so they purposefully, I mean, they wouldn't have let a crew go in there that hadn't done big films. Not because we were any better than anybody else like that. It was just that George had never done a big film, and nor had Gary Kurtz, who was the producer. Neither of them have. The biggest film they had done at that point was American Graffiti.
Yeah, and so leading up to your time on the original Star Wars and the original trilogy, can you tell us a bit about your career leading up to that moment and how you got that job on Star Wars?
Well, yeah, because I'd been through a career which began in 1960, working my way up through the ranks, as it were, and I did a couple of James Bond movies in the mid-60s, Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, and of course 2001: A Space Odyssey at that point. And then on through Papillon with Steve McQueen, Dustin Hoffman. I'm mentioning the kind of ones that people may have heard of. And I met Gary Kurtz in Los Angeles when I just finished shooting a film in Mexico, which I was only allowed to do because it was shot entirely in Mexico, not being an American, etc. And I was back at MGM Studios just wrapping it up because I wasn't doing the post-production before I was going home to England. And I got this call from Gary Kurtz saying, "Can I come up and talk to you about shooting in England?" I said, "Please." So he came up, asked me some questions and the rest of it. And it was before he and George had made American Graffiti. So it was quite a long time ago. And I left, thought no more about it, forgotten all about it. And then suddenly I'm down in Greece, actually. I was doing a film for 20th Century Fox, helping out a friend of mine because they'd had a problem with an explosion and somebody had been killed. And so I went down to Athens at the last minute, give him a hand, and help him get the film finished. Luckily it was a Fox film, and I got a call from Fox in London saying, "You'll come back to London for one day because Gary Kurtz is coming over." So over he came. And I go to 20th Century Fox, and there's a bunch of other people there who do my job, so I'm not the only one. It's, you know, this is obviously interview time. So I saw Gary again, had the interview, and flew straight back to Greece and finished the film there. And I think it was while I was still in Greece I was told I got the job. I thought, well, that's nice. It must be because I met Gary before in Los Angeles. And it was only last year I finally asked Gary. I saw him, I said, "You know, Gary, I've never asked you this question. Did I get the job because you'd met me before in Los Angeles all those years before?" And he said, "No, not really." He said, "Stanley Kubrick recommended you." And I didn't know. Now Stanley was dead, I couldn't even say thank you. because Star Wars was to change my life, because it went on then to Indiana Jones, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit for Steve, and it was a great period time, with those movies.
Yeah, that wow! And a recommendation from Stanley Kubrick. That's gotta. don't you wish you could have put that on your resume many years ago? But you mentioned that you've been working in film since 1960, and J.J. Abrams and the crew of The Force Awakens, they were inspired by movies that you made. What were some of the movies that inspired you when you were working in film and to get into film and that sort of thing?
Well, I'll tell you the film that I went, I want to do that. And I was a little boy, about 10 years old at the time, and it was a version of Treasure Island that came out with a wonderful performance from a guy called, English actor called Robert Newton, who played Long John Silver. But of course the hero of Treasure Island is a boy, Jim Hawkins. And he was played by Disney's #1 child star at that time, who was a boy called Bobby Driscoll. And apart from that, the crew were entirely English. And I see him up on a screen, and he's maybe a couple of years older than me. I'm 10, he's about 12. And I go, whoa, that's what I want to do. I want to do what he's doing there. And that's what started me going, yeah, this is what I really want to do. Then as I grew older, I began to discover there was a whole world behind the camera. And my grandfather, in the post-Second World War era, was a script writer at Ealing Studios in London. And he had actually helped a guy who wanted to get into the film industry get a job at Ealing Studios. And so when the time came that I wanted to go in the movie business, that guy got me my first job. It's really as a gopher or runner, as they call it, But that's how it worked. It was kind of a form of nepotism, if you like, because there were no film schools there. There was no other, that was the only way in. And it's a tough game, but I got a permanent job with a company that made television commercials. And that was my film school. Endless 30-second films, but each one of them went through this process of a film. And so I was considered as my film school, because I did so many of them. And all the crews that we employed were feature film people who were between films. So I got to know masses of people. And then I finally got into the union, because you had to be a union member. And I went back into feature films as a second assistant director on a film called The Man in the Middle, starring Robert Mitchum and Trevor Howard. And that's where my career really began.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really cool to start in advertising and to make your way into Star Wars. I believe actually Sir Alec Guinness actually had a career in advertising as well. So obviously that's the place to start if you want to be a Star Wars star. But let's talk about that original Star Wars movie. You mentioned that 20th Century Fox didn't believe in it, and we've always heard it was a kind of a crazy film to work on just because nobody understood it. A lot of the crew didn't really believe in it. What do you recall from your time when you first read the script of Star Wars, what you thought of it, and what that set was actually like to be on?
I actually believed in it. Yes. I was one of the ones who did. I thought it was a great script. A lot of nobody had made a science fiction film like it before, and some of the crew sort of couldn't get their heads around it. Well, that's their bad luck. I believed in it. I always believed in it. I knew it would be a hit. I thought it would do like James Bond business, which was like big business in those days. But of course it was to do much more than that. And when Star Wars opened, I was in the middle of Afghanistan doing a film, a sort of art house movie called Meetings with Remarkable Men about the early life of a Russian mystic called Gurdjieff, directed by England's #1 theatre director, Peter Brook. And there was I had no telephone in the production office. It was very primitive in Afghanistan. Then I had a telex. That was the only way. So I couldn't talk to people at the studio. I'd just get a telex with stuff and I'd send it back, stuff back. The only way I knew what was going on in the outside world was that I would buy Time and Newsweek magazine every week. And one week I bought Time magazine and I opened it up and there were about 8 colour pages of pictures of Star Wars, and I went, my God! And that's how I learned that it had been this huge hit. There I am in the middle of Kabul in Afghanistan. But, you know, then when I got back to Pinewood Studios, where we were based, everybody was going, Robert, you seen what that film you worked on? I said, yeah. I mean, I couldn't get my head around it to start with. But of course, as George had said, if it's a success, we're going to make 2 more. Well, fairly shortly after that, I began work on The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. Was there a sense of like, I told you so when you started to see the success of Star Wars? Because you, like you said, you were one of the few guys that believed in it.
No, I couldn't do that because, you know, I hadn't argued with anybody like, you know, our cameraman didn't believe in it and also treated George very badly because, you know, I think he was a frustrated director, and he looked at George and thought, you know, what's this kid doing directing this movie? And it's a load of old rubbish anyway. What is this thing we're doing? It was like...
The cinematographer or the cameraman?
The cinematographer. Well, we call it the cameraman.
Oh, okay.
But I don't want to, you know, he just recently died. He lived to be almost 100. Oh, by the way, the cameraman who did all the Indiana Jones with me, Douglas Slocum, right? Dougie, absolutely wonderful cameraman. He died about 3 or 4 months ago. Do you know how old he was?
No.
102.
Wow, goodness! he seemed like he was going to give Yoda a run for his money with that. Yeah, right. Yeah. So we should all.
He did 102. He was in his 70s when we were doing the Indiana Jones. In fact, the last movie he was director of photography on was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But 102.
Yeah, we should all be so lucky.
He was such a lovely guy. Such a lovely guy.
That's wonderful. So you know, once those movies wrapped up, did you keep in touch with people that you had worked with on those movies, with George or Gary or Dougie or anybody like that?
Yes, because I was bound to. You know, we were going on and making other ones. You know, and off we went. And Empire Strikes Back started. I first met Dougie, of course, on Raiders of the Lost Ark. But then, of course, did 3 films with him. And on the Indiana Jones films, more than the Star Wars films, we had the identical crews because we had the same director of photography and Steven Spielberg directing, whereas on the Star Wars we had different directors each time. So there were different people that they had, their director of photography, etc. But on the Indies, it was like a family coming back together each time.
That's wonderful. We're kind of seeing that again with the new Star Wars movies. Only they're keeping most of the crew. They're just changing the directors around.
Yes, because JJ isn't doing it this time.
Rian Johnson doing Episode 8. Gareth Edwards doing Rogue One. Are you familiar with any of the directors who are working on the new Star Wars movie?
No, I'm not actually. I ought to be. No, I'll tell you the truth. I had a period where I had to disappear because I had cancer. And for 5 years I was gone in a sort of separate universe, if you like, with all the chemotherapy and radiotherapy and all that kind of stuff. But about 4 or 5 months ago, I went for my cancer check, which they do every 6 months. And this time they said to me, "We don't want to see you again."
I think that's the one time you're okay with somebody telling you, "I don't want to see you again."
I know. But it was like being reborn, seriously. So in a sense, although, kept these going, I've been working with Mauro before, now I can really get my head into it. Now I'm not going to go back and they're going to say, "Oh, sorry, you've only got 2 months to live," or something. And I'm cured, Everybody says I'm in remission. I'm not in remission. They don't want to see me again.
Well, yeah.
I have to say, Clint Eastwood made his name on Sergio Leone's films, right? Do you remember those? The Fistful of Dollar movies, Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More. Do you remember those still?
Sergio Leone.
Right. Sergio Leone. And he was known as the man with no name, right? Well, I was going to do a series like that, but my character was going to be called the man with no ass. You know why?
Why?
Because when at the cancer, I haven't got an ass. But I thought about it and I thought, no, I don't think that'll go down well.
Well, if that's what it takes to keep you around a little bit longer, I think we're all very, 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 very happy.
Dominic, I'm delighted. I feel like, it was a bit like being reborn having that. And then Mauro coming along with his wonderful project. And,
which we will talk about in just a moment. But I do want to ask a little bit more about the original trilogy with Star Wars. When you came back for The Empire Strikes Back, how different was the atmosphere? You went from a movie where, as you were saying, George was fighting with the cameraman, and there was a lot of, like you were saying, most people didn't believe in it, and then you come back after having it be the most successful movie in the world, where pages in Newsweek and Time, and then you go back to make the sequel. Was there sort of a sense of what was the sense? What was the feeling like in the production and on the set that time around?
Well, the first thing is that when we finished the first movie, and George has said, if it's a success, we'll do another one, we, what's known as pack-struck pieces of set up into the Millennium Falcon, anything we might need again, and we put them in containers on the back lot of the studio, knowing that the next year we're either going to bring them out and junk them, or we're going to bring them out and use them. So we've done that. And then this incredible, event happened. And I said to myself, the most important thing here for me is to make sure that people don't think we've got more money than sense. I've got to make a film. Yes, I'm not going to have 20th Century Fox breathing down my neck, because they never tied up the sequel rights or the merchandising rights. So George is doing without them.
I feel like the biggest mistake they ever made.
Yes, probably was, but they didn't. They distributed the others, but George had everything. He got the merchandising, all the rights to them, and so we set out. But I was most anxious at that time that we shouldn't go bonkers, because it's so easy. You could waste an awful lot of money because people think you got more money than sense. And I always felt going in, my first real sense was I've got to make sure, yes, it's not going to be like last time. We will have the money and the time to do it properly. But no, we mustn't waste money just because everybody thinks we're richer than Croesus, And so it worked all right, because we had a proper development time, which from the first Star Wars, the rush. They didn't give us enough, they didn't green light us enough. The first time 3PO's costume went on incomplete was the first day of shooting. which we were doing when they bought the robots, that scene out in Tunisia. That was the first day it went on, because we were in such a panic and rush. Well, at least now I could sit down, with the designer and everything, and we could work out a proper, practical pre-production period. And I could schedule the movie for shooting, the proper schedule. And we had the budget to do things, but as I said, I was very conscious that I mustn't get into the frame of mind of, I've got more money than I can do anything, So you have to keep it within a budget and yet put the money in the right place. So you give the audience a brilliant film, because actually The Empire Strikes Back is the best of those first three as a piece of movie making. It's not the best in terms of, the original is the best in terms of kicking it in the face, because it's such an amazing thing. But Empire was amazingly well directed by Irving Kershner, and
people always like to ask Star Wars fans, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? What's the best Star Wars movie? I always say, you have to say the original. The original is the best because that's the one that introduced us to this wonderful universe that George created and all of you guys put together on screen, and it introduces you, it exposes us to all these concepts, opens imaginations. But Empire's a little bit better, sort of thing. It just kind of...
It's beautifully directed. And yes, it's also interesting because the first one, in case we never made another one, we had to resolve. The only thing we left open was Vader spinning off into space, in case. If you look at Empire, it's a middle episode, doesn't resolve. All the heroes. I remember George telling me when he started to write Jedi, he said, oh God, he said, I've got all the heroes scattered amongst the galaxy, I've got to bring them together. Jabba's palace is where that happens.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then on Empire Strikes Back, you got to work with your half-brother, Jeremy Bulloch, who went on to play Boba Fett. Was him getting that part your work?
I have to admit that I rang Jeremy up. He's an actor. I never got him a job or anything. I said, look, Jeremy, come out to Elstree Studios because I've got a job for you. You don't have to see the casting director or anybody. Come out to the studio, and if the suit fits, you've got the job.
And
he makes more money out of that, going to all these conventions and the rest of it. I got him this job in 1979. It's still going on in 2016. So I only ever got him one job, but think about it.
It was the best job you ever could have gotten him.
No, because he's always at these conventions. I'm going to see him. I'm off to the Cayman Islands next week for the Cayman Islands Film Festival, and he'll be there. And I am, believe it or not, receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Congratulations, that's fantastic.
I'm going to say, when I get it, I'm going to say, oh, she's lifetime. I'm not dead yet. Why are you giving me this? I'll be back in 20 years for another one.
Lifetime Achievement Award 2. Yeah. And so, one of your responsibilities, I understand, on the original, or on Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back, was to scout for locations for these locations that are not from our world. How do you go about doing something like that when you're working on a science fiction movie, to go around and try and find places on Earth that will double for somewhere else in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away?
Well, you find something that isn't sort of typical thing. So, for example, on the original Star Wars, the homestead is in Tunisia, just a place called Tozeur, and it's on a salt flat. And it looks very otherworldly because there isn't a tree and it's just dead flat, and there's the homestead. And, and when you see those twin suns setting, one was real, another one was put in. So, but that was good. But then also, for example, Mos Eisley, the exterior of the cantina and all of that. These aren't the droids you're looking for, you know all that. That was on the island of Jerba in Tunisia. And if you look at the architecture around it, it's very unusual. It's not typical Arab architecture on the island of Jerba. I went with John Barry, the designer. First I went to Morocco with him. We looked at it and I said, everything looked Moroccan, you know. But Tunisia held this key and it worked.
He created one of the most iconic locations in film that you know they keep going back to in Star Wars projects, and so you know, once you wrapped up on Return of the Jedi and you continued on with the Indiana Jones movies, and when you look back at that time, and you worked with people like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Is there anything that you can think of that like they taught you, and is there anything that you can think of that you taught them?
Be awfully difficult for me to say what did I teach them. Let's put it this way. They didn't need to learn anything from me because they employed me to do what I do, so they didn't have to learn it, right? I learned a great deal from them. George, I mean, golly Moses, his imagination and ability to create, you know, a drama like Star Wars, etc., which is actually about the Vietnam War, if you look underneath it. And Steven Spielberg, though, as a director, is the most exciting director to work for because he challenges you. He'd say, Robert, I want this. I'll go, all right then, Steven. And I always delivered to him, but it's really exciting. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved being challenged. And I can't imagine. He's superb director. Yeah.
And now, you know, there are all these Star Wars movies. There's been another Indiana Jones movie. There's going to be another Indiana Jones movie. Are you surprised at all that these franchises that you worked on, or these, I don't even want to call them franchises, these stories that you worked on back then keep coming back, and people are still interested? There's still that audience for them?
I think it's absolutely great. And, you know, Star Wars is one thing and Indiana Jones is another. They're very different species, you know, because Indiana Jones is Earth-based, archaeologist, all of this kind of stuff. And I love to see those because I adored working on Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was it was real tough movie, and I remember when I got the script of Raiders, and I'd met Stephen by now, and he'd okayed me to work, and I did a schedule for the film, and I laid it out over 23 weeks, right? And I showed it to Steve, and he said, I don't need as long as that. And he'd gone way over on his previous route, 1941. I don't need as long as that. Take 7 weeks out of it. So I go, oh, bloody hell. So I end up with a 17-week schedule, right? And I kept going to George and saying, look, he said, don't worry about it, Robert. So we go off to shoot, right? 17 weeks schedule. We shot it in 15 weeks. It's the first time I've ever done one under schedule. And you can see the energy in Raiders. The energy is in there because that's the way he shot it.
Fantastic. And so, do you have a favorite scene from the Star Wars movies or the Indiana Jones movies? Is there one scene that stands out to you as great? Or better than the rest?
The Star Wars movies, I have to pick the very first shot in the original Star Wars when the Rebel blockade runner goes over camera and then this Star Destroyer appears like that and it goes on and on and on and on. that is the most powerful image because nobody'd seen anything like it before, and it was absolutely wonderful. Raiders of the Lost Ark, cutting the rope bridge in Temple of Doom was one only because we had one go at it because we didn't. It's not computer generated. We couldn't do it in those days. It's done for real, and we had we had 7 cameras turning on it. 7 cameras turning on it, and when the bridge cut, because we had cutters in there because there were steel cables through it, and it went like that, and Stephen wanted the dummies to kick as they fell because normally dummies just fall like that, and it worked 100%. Never in my life have I heard a crew cheer like that. And every time I see it, I remember that waiting there for that moment, because if 3 of them had gone and 1 hadn't.
These Indiana Jones movies, they sound like everything went, better than possibly expected.
Yeah, in many ways they did, because the crews we had on those were everybody was superb. Every single person who worked with us was superb, and Steven Spielberg was a very exciting director to work for.
And I have to ask you about in Return of the Jedi that you actually had a quick cameo as the driver of the AT-ST. Having worked on the Star Wars movies and having been involved behind the scenes, were you still able to enjoy that moment of how cool it was? Because, if somebody asks me, do you want to do a scene in the new Star Wars movie, you just be a stormtrooper, you don't do anything, that would be the greatest thing ever. But for someone who's seen how the movie gets made and has been so involved, were you still able to enjoy the fact that you were going to be in Star Wars?
Yeah, because what happened was that sequence, for example, is what we call a pickup. We do at the end of the film just bits and pieces. And we were at Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, and we got a couple of extras in to play the roles. And then suddenly somebody said, why don't you and Richard Markman, the director, why don't you and Richard play the roles? So he said, all right. So he put on the gear, got in the thing and did it. I'm so glad I did now. I do these autographs for people with photographs, right? I sometimes say, because it's a photograph of me and as that co-pilot, and I'll say to people, now, would you like me to sign this photograph, which took me 4 hours, this job, or would you like me to sign this one, which took 16 years? Well, they go, the one that took 4 hours. That's all it did take.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned that was part of the pickups and reshoots. And in Star Wars right now, the movie that's being shot, Rogue One, there have been all these reports of reshoots and pickups going on, and that has caused some fans to be concerned. Do you want to explain what reshoots and pickups are on films, and how they're not really a cause for concern most of the time?
Well, reshoots is an unusual expression. It means retakes, really. You're going back to redo something you did it. Pickups are always, they're just the odd shots that are left over, like those 2 pilots and the thing, that aren't, don't require principal cast and the rest of it. I'm not sure what's been going on. I haven't been reading enough on this. All your guys listening to this will know far more about it than I do. I don't know,
but it is something that, pickups and little bits of additional shooting happen generally on most films, right?
Oh yes, generally speaking. At the end, also when you edit the film, you might need an extra something or other, even if it's a close-up of a hand picking up a rock or something. But they're no big deal.
No big deal. So we hear that, guys? No big deal.
No
Don't
big deal,
don't worry. Don't worry. And finally, I have to ask you about this new, I want to ask you about this new project that you've got going on. It's called Election Day. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this is a futuristic project. It's very, I think, today in its nature. If you think what's going on in America now, you might. It's about. It has obviously futuristic ability by scientists through DNA to recreate actual people who are alive fully. And in the film, as a baseline, we are really looking to get to a place where we have all these different characters, and one of them is going to be elected as the ruler of the world, if you like. Ruler being the wrong word in that sense. It's not that kind of despotic thing, but it covers a lot of ground. It covers a lot of things that people are interested in today, extraterrestrials, all kinds of things. I'm not going to go into huge detail on it, but I think it's a very futuristic, cross-dimensional piece, and I think it's going to generate a lot of interest.
Do you have an idea of when and how people will be able to see this project?
Well, we're in the process of financing it right now. That's why I'm here in Canada, actually. And I would very much like to shoot it here in Toronto using the studio facilities here, which it could do very easily, because I've only done one filming, and that was in Vancouver, alive. But it'd be great. It would be perfect to shoot it up here in Toronto. We've got great crews here in Canada, and I'd love to make it here.
We would love to have your production here. That would be really, really cool. So, Robert, thank you so much for taking so much time to talk to me. This has been so cool to get to speak to somebody who was so involved and was there when these movies that I love so much came out. So not only thank you for talking to me, but thank you for everything that you did on Star Wars and continue to do in film.
Dominic, it's been my pleasure, and it's been my pleasure to talk to your group, whoever are listening to this, or and say, just wait, because there's more Star Wars to come, but that's not the only thing. There's a thing called Election Day coming. Wait and see that.
Yes. You can see both. You can see both. So Robert, thank you. And of course, may the Force be with you.
And may the Force be with you too, Dominic.
All right. Wow. So that was an absolutely incredible interview.
That was so good. That was so good.
And Robert, yeah. Oh my gosh. I was telling the other hosts before the show 8 years ago. I'm sure we did play that on our show, but it's been so long I didn't remember much from this.
Zero memory of that. Zero memory of that. Of course, I have zero memory of last week's episode, so that's just me.
That's why we recorded everything.
Yeah,
that was a treat listening back to that. That was a very great conversation. Like
Robert Watts, he's such a character all his own. He's got a great personality, and I love his taking credit for Jeremy Bullock's, he's making all this money because of me.
Yeah.
Money.
I love that. Yeah, he is such a character, isn't he? I mean, I really love just at the end right there when he says, "May the Force be with you," back to Dom. I'm like, that's so wholesome. That's so nice. And he's just like, whoever listens to this, whatever group follows you. I'm like, yeah. Thank you. Yes, that is us.
Oh my goodness.
That's so good. What a fantastic conversation.
That's incredible. So of course we'll be keeping all of Robert's friends and family in our thoughts in this time, and lost another one, most unfortunately. Hopefully we go for a while without any unfortunate passings after this little stretch here, because
you've taken enough, universe.
Yeah,
we're gonna hold on to the rest of them, okay? No more.
Oh my gosh, yes, certainly. So I think we got a little bit of news to get to before we move on to your questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, first of all, let me mention something really quick. I know it's maybe not news, but it is noteworthy. Today, as of recording this, is the 10th anniversary of the premiere of Star Wars Rebels. Also, 16 years since the premiere of the Clone Wars. I had forgotten both of them came out on the same day, obviously different years. Yeah, wild stuff. Also, a year since Ahsoka finale premiered. So, like, a lot of time has passed. Like, so many things have happened on this day. Long time in the past. It blows my mind that Clone Wars was 16 years ago. It blows my mind that Rebels was 10 years ago. And then, hearing them talk about Rogue One and all those reshoots. I remember that. Freaking 8 years ago. Come on, man. I'm getting old here. This is not good.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's so exciting to, I mean, the fact that we have all this storytelling from Star Wars, because I think with the movies and with the sequels coming out, it was such a special time with the movies, and we're getting so many movies, and there was so much to talk about and get into with each new release for that period of the 2010s. But one thing that I felt like really just spurred the fandom to really sink its roots deep into culture and people's lives was the animated shows. I think that's really what kept people connected in with the franchise and kind of make Star Wars more of, oh, that's my favorite movie, and it turned it into more of a, oh, this is like my hobby, my lifestyle. I follow Star Wars actively because it's constantly on our screens with Rebels, with Clone Wars. And I think, yeah, it's a lot of people say it's their favorite Star Wars content, and some of the best storytelling is from Clone Wars. So yeah, and same with Rebels as well. And I think Rebels was probably more of a gamble at the time for Disney, because it came about in an interesting way of like canceling Clone Wars to and then do Rebels. But it paid off because obviously Rebels is such a incredible like all of it together, the 4 seasons is quite an incredible journey. And the fact that we're not even done with the stories, like the latest big reveal at the end of Ahsoka was seeing Ezra Bridger again. Like the fact that these characters didn't just go by the wayside, they're still very important now and will be. And it's kind of crazy to think like we'll be getting Thrawn and Sabine and Ezra and everyone's their stories continuing in Star Wars still. So 10 years still worth it. What a gamble.
Yeah, I think what's really amazing and notable about the Clone Wars specifically is that I think it was the first Star Wars project when social media started really becoming a common thing.
Yes.
I think perhaps MySpace or maybe Friendster was around during some of the prequels, but it definitely was not a very widespread thing. It was kind of like college students and things. But by the time the Clone Wars was in full swing, we had YouTube, we had Facebook, we had the site formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram started as well during the later seasons of the Clone Wars. So I think that's that kind of next generation of like Web 2.0 Star Wars fandom. Clone Wars was the thing that was the project, was the media out when that happened. So I think that's why it has that really notable and unique impact. And it's what consolidated a lot of fandom together around the first Star Wars social media groups and pages and things.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, like both of those shows bridged a huge gap in like a good decade in between Star Wars films. Most of that decade we spent not expecting any more Star Wars films. Clone Wars was kind of like, okay, this is Star Wars now. This is what we're going to expect. They're not doing, George said no more movies, guys. So like, this is it. And we got used to that. And Clone Wars was kind of this idea of like what Star Wars could be and expanding that. And then Rebels became, okay, what is Star Wars made by Disney? What does that look like? No one really knew. Rebels was that first, like, especially Spark of Rebellion, which came out 10 years ago today. was just like, okay, what is this? And still to this day, Spark of Rebellion, I think, is probably one of my favorite episodes of that show. It's so good, and I think it holds up very well. And that's probably like, production wise, animation wise, whatever else, is probably the worst the show and things. And that's not a bashing the show. I'm just saying the show got better from there, I think, in a lot of ways. I think one of Rebel's strengths is the fact that it doesn't do what Clone Wars does. Clone Wars, as much as I love it, it went all over the place. It had storylines here and there. It was very unfocused. It was an anthology show. That's what it was. Rebels told a clear cut, beginning, middle, of an end story. But also, as Hannah said, it ain't over yet. The stories that started 16 plus years ago with Clone Wars, with Ahsoka, still happening right now. We're still anticipating more stuff. So it's really great. And apparently Ahsoka is going to be going into production. I think that's something that came out today. That Ahsoka is supposed to be going to be in production next year. So it ain't stopping, guys. It's the train, the Star Wars animation train continues. So,
yes.
Yeah.
There was no cue.
Agreement. I'll just assume silence means I said all the right things.
Yeah, you just shocked us so much with that statement, Ben. Shocked us.
Lovely. Actually, it doesn't hurt anybody just to have silence for a second. Okay, it's not. It's not killing anyone. I know silence is supposed to be our enemy on podcasts, but it actually doesn't hurt anyone.
Hey, we just had to take a moment. We had to take a moment.
Just take a moment. Just take a breather. I have that effect sometimes. People just, flabbergasted by some things I say. Anyway.
The next thing to say was we have a trailer for the upcoming documentary, Music by John Williams.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
That was the cue.
That was it. Music by John Williams, the new documentary coming out November 1st on Disney Plus. We got a poster, we got a trailer. It looks really good, and honestly, about damn time that John Williams got a proper documentary about him.
And I can't tell if this is maybe just old or reused in some way, but we might have new George Lucas footage and comments within it.
There's new. I've never seen that before.
I'm like, this looks current.
It didn't look archival.
Looks like, it looks current. Hey,
I feel like I can tell. I can tell the George eras. You can tell when it's 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. You can tell the George eras. This feels more modern era George, stuff that we maybe haven't seen before, which is very exciting. If they got George to do more interviews, you got me locked in, all right? You had me at John Williams. You're definitely got me a new George content.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited for this. Very much looking forward to this coming out.
And then, of course, there's tons of other interviews in there. Steven Spielberg, you name it. His things. Even John Williams himself has been out doing press, stuff like that, talking about his favorite film scores. So that's going to be very exciting. So less than a month away. Really, really great stuff. One more thing. We'll go one more thing, and then we'll get your questions really quick. So this comes via DragonCon, or via our friends at CultureSlate. Actually, they did a great write-up.
Our friends? You mean us?
Yes, that too. Okay,
we're all from CultureSlate. You think it sounded like it's other people?
Those people.
I know we all work there, but I didn't write the article. Okay, I didn't write it. Okay, I didn't write it. Not my department. Okay.
You're right.
But so, and this has actually been quite, kind of a slow news week, but this has been kind of caused quite the stir. Giancarlo Esposito was, of course, on this great panel, which the full write-up is great. Seriously, check it out. And I think there's some video out there too. Because it had Natasha Leopardizo, had Danny Trejo, great panel at DragonCon, just kind of their Star Wars panel. I think Manny Jacinto was on it too. But this quote from Giancarlo has been making the rounds. And you could definitely kind of make the case that it's not super big news, but I think it's interesting to get his take on this. So he's specifically talking about the future of the Mandoverse, and he's still campaigning. He's pulling a Sam Jackson on this. He believes that Moff Gideon is still alive. He's beating that drum, and more power to him. Even though he burned up in a giant fireball. I'm sorry, Giancarlo. He's dead. He's dead this time. But he says, and quote, as in the MCU, Disney will figure out how to join all these characters into one really great movie or TV show. That's my sense of where it will go. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have a new vision, continuing on with the Mandalorian movie. My sense that it's all going to converge at one point or another, and we're going to have another set or a trilogy or more of films. End quote. So Giancarlo is
wow.
Like, obviously, it's not him saying, oh, this is going to happen. I heard Filoni told me. But he's like, hey, I've worked with these guys. I've been behind the scenes. And I feel like this is where it's going. I feel like that's interesting to get his take on this. And the fact that he's saying something that I kind of thought of, which is like, well, there was Dave Filoni's movie. Now they've expanded to the Mandalorian Grogu. We're hearing rumors that maybe Mandalorian is not going to be a TV show anymore. Maybe we're going into, okay, this is going to be a film series now. And that's interesting. To him talk about like a trilogy, I'm like, yeah, Star Wars tends to come in threes, so they could just add another movie to it and make it a trilogy. I don't know, but very interesting.
This is really cool. And I'm going to table my Giancarlo Esposito related rant till after we talk about the Star Wars part of this, because I do have a rant that relates slightly to Star Wars. But Dave Filoni is having one of the most fascinating transitions from someone who works in television animation to a feature film director. Like, it's such an interesting journey that he's on. Obviously, Favreau, he's been in the film world for quite some time now. This stuff isn't new for him. But for Filoni, you have to believe, of course, that as a kid who grew up as a fan of Star Wars, as a Star Wars cosplayer when he was a teenager and a young adult, that of course his number one dream probably is to direct a Star Wars film. That's probably like the number one bucket list thing for him, and probably more so to direct a Star Wars trilogy, to just have the rest of his life be directing Star Wars films. And while we know that Dave Filoni is very adept at animation, incredible at animation, some of the best, if not the best Star Wars animation is Dave Filoni, Star Wars animation, and he's fantastic with live action as well. Again, some of the best live action TV from Star Wars, Dave Filoni related. The guy, probably his dream is just for the rest of his life to make Star Wars films. And he's not that, he's pretty young. He's pretty young. And so we've been saying this for now, oh my gosh. I mean, Dave Filoni's been considered George Lucas's Padawan for it feels like 20 years now. Like probably 16 years since that Clone Wars movie came out. That we kind of all imagined a future. I'm sure all of us imagined a future in our heads where George Lucas was no longer making Star Wars films. The person making Star Wars films was Dave Filoni. Like, I think we all imagined a future where Dave Filoni was the main creative driver behind Star Wars. And he pretty much is. He's the chief creative officer. But also specifically in the realm of films too, and not just Disney Plus, not just animation. So this is not surprising at all. I don't think Giancarlo Esposito is just saying, doing some wish fulfillment here and being like, well, I would like to be in a bunch of a giant movie series, so I'm going to put this out here that I think this is where this is going so we can get some buzz going. I really think this is what Dave Filoni wants to do. I really think that Dave Filoni wants to make 10 Star Wars movies in his life. And I really expect that. We talk about it within the limited scope of what we know is announced. We talk about it knowing that there's only 2 films announced, a Jon Favreau film and a Dave Filoni film, because that's all has been officially said. And, there's enough to talk about just amongst stuff that's announced that doesn't happen. There's no point in bringing up things that aren't and speculating. But to actually indulge speculation just for one moment, do we really think that Dave Filoni's Heir to the Empire movie is going to be the only Dave Filoni movie? Do we really think that? Do you think he's just going to retire after that and be like, okay, bye, I did it, I made a Star Wars film? No, there's going to be a lot, and it's not going to be random stuff. It's going to be those same characters from the Clone Wars, from Rebels, from the Mandoverse. We're going to have Ahsoka films and Ezra Bridger films and Grogu films for the rest of our lives. That's what I think is going to happen, and I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And I think I actually brought this up last week about how much right now, like I feel like we're used to saying this, but honestly, there's such a different feel with Lucasfilm at the moment. Again, I think it started with the experience of the Acolyte, and then my ears definitely perked in terms of whether it was leaked or however it got out that the Acolyte, they cancelled the next season of the Acolyte. That is just so different. That is such a just the fact that they did that, and it kind of let it get out like that, and was just like, yep, that's the sitch. We're just not going to do another one. I think says a lot about where they're at, and whether it's a good or bad thing, I think we're yet to see. I have hope that it's a good thing. Not talking about the Acolyte specifically, of like the Acolyte being cancelled, is that good or bad? But in terms of the feeling of Lucasfilm, they're having a lot more self-awareness and self-introspection in a better way that I think they've had before. I think a criticism in the past few years of Lucasfilm is how much they're announcing and not following through, how much they're mentioning and then tabling and then shelving and announcing again, and then don't worry about that, it's cancelled. Like that is the tiresome experience, whether you hate whatever movies you hate or love whatever movies you love. That's been the experience for all Star Wars fans, being like, I wish they would just like follow through or do this thing or tell us what's going on. Where I do feel the shift right now behind the scenes is actually understanding that is wearing fans out, and they need to have a more confident display going forward for fans to hold on to and continue with. And I think the shifting of how they're moving things around for Mando and, make it a movie, like as much as it's only rumored and unconfirmed because, Star Wars won't announce things like that. But the fact that things like that are being rumored, it's like they're doing that work behind the scenes. They're analyzing the situations of, okay, how do we continue the story? Where does it need to finish? Do we try and force out another 10 seasons of The Mandalorian because of Grogu and everyone loves Grogu? No, it's okay. How about we wrap up this story here? Then we'll, open up with more movies and things like that. I think it's a positive thing, the way they're shifting around, as much as it's like, okay, things may be shelved and cancelled that people really loved. But I think overall, hopefully in hindsight, in a few years, this year, and this period was a critical time for Lucasfilm to actually just change gear, be self-aware of what they're saying and doing and creating, and make it for the better.
Yeah.
That's my speech.
Yeah, no, it's funny while you were going over that, especially mentioning Acolyte, it made me think of just like, if we're entering this new era and we're unfortunately dealing with the side effects of the business side of the this creative endeavor, of which is always going to be a part of it. I think I would rather them do more movies instead of doing more TV shows if they are going to pull an Acolyte and not commit to something and not go, well, we're going to tell this story, but it's going to be a multi-season story, clearly, but we're not going to greenlight 3 seasons. We're only going to greenlight 1 season, and we're going to see how it goes, and then we're going to pull a plug when things don't go exactly the way we want them to go. I would rather them just go like, okay, we're going to test this thing, and we're going to make it a movie, and it's going to be a one and done thing. And then if it works, then we'll do more movies. But if it doesn't, then it'll just be one movie that's a self-contained story. I hope they do more of that, because I think the fandom at this point is exasperated by a lot of this stuff. There's been a lot of drama, and it is a uniquely hardcore Star Wars fandom, people that are constantly on Twitter or whatever the frick they call it nowadays, like all the time on it, like me, that are reading all this stuff, that are reading the discourse, that are reading the comments, that are reading the trades, figuring out what's going on. And I know most people in the world aren't doing that. And they just like, oh, there's a new Star Wars show on Disney Plus, or there's a new Star Wars movie in theaters. I'm going to go watch it. Like, that's most people's experience with Star Wars. But for the hardcore fans, I do think that adds something. And a lot of people do read this stuff. And I do hope that we can start to turn things around, because there is this just general, so many things have been canceled. And then when stuff does get on the air and I like it, it gets pulled out from under me and they cancel that. And just like, people are getting tired. And I think we need some more consistency and just more, I think a film trilogy would, for The Mandalorian, I think would work. I think you would get butts and seats and it would be really exciting. And if that's where Disney wants things to be, and they've realized maybe the streaming bubble has burst and that's not where their bread's buttered anymore, then maybe that's where we're going. I don't know. But I do think that we need some clarity on this and just like a real vision going forward, because as we've said, like as Hannah was saying, like just it's kind of been all over the place recently.
Yeah. And I think it's about the thing that's been frustrating about Star Wars is it hasn't had a executive director. Like that's the issue. Is like Kathleen Kennedy is a producer and an executive as president of Lucasfilm, but she's not the person that's going to write a script. She's not the person that's going to direct a movie. And so we brought in so many different creative people to write and direct and to push the direction of Star Wars this way and that way and this way and that way. And sometimes it's literally a tug of war going on between, like, say, a J.J. Abrams and a Rian Johnson. Or literally within the same production, having to try out some directors and then replace them with other ones, which has happened. I think it's a matter of, I think in order to have stability, you need that thing. Like, I think you need someone that is both an executive who's making decisions on a company-wide level, who's shaping all of Star Wars and has some final say on a lot of stuff, but also is that creative person who can then go in and do the direction and the writing and all that too, so that other people don't have to be relied upon. And I think the problem is that, again, as fans, we've all known for a very long time that person is Dave Filoni. We all know that. But the thing is, look at Dave Filoni's resume in 2012. Like, when you go to when that person was no longer George Lucas, Dave Filoni had made several seasons of an animated TV show and a movie that was not intended to be a movie, but ended up being a movie. That did okay in theaters. It's made its money back because it was so cheap to make, but it would have been a bomb if it would have had the budget of a movie. And so, I completely understand why Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger would not want to hand Dave Filoni the reins and say, you direct 7, 8, and 9. At the same time, we all know that if they had done what we would have done in that position and let Dave Filoni write and direct episodes 7, 8, and 9, I think that there'd be a lot less frustration with Star Wars amongst the fans and their opinions of what they've done. I think that we would be 10 years ahead of where we're at now. They're basically resetting the paradigm for Star Wars in this year of 2024, 12 years after George Lucas left. 12 years later, they are they're at the foundational parts of what are we going to do with Star Wars this year, which is wild. That they could have saved so much time by just doing what I think if you'd polled fans, they would have said, this is what you need to do, and had Dave Filoni been that person. Now what we're seeing with this reset, after Dave Filoni's been given an opportunity to direct live action and to direct more shows and to be more at an executive level overseeing shows and to be a chief creative officer over everything and, to now be starting to develop a film. Now we're at the point where I think Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy and all the other people that are involved in those decisions are going to start feeling comfortable with the idea of Star Wars. The main creative guy is Dave Filoni. The main director, writer guy is Dave Filoni. And most of the movies are going to either be Dave Filoni movies or he's going to be the overarching creative advisor for everything. Like, I think that's, and so instead of, already probably being at this point, if they had made that decision then and already having had like 4 or 5 Dave Filoni movies or Dave Filoni related movies, now it's going to be another 10 years till we can look back and say that. But I think we will.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that, not to keep harping on this, but you bring up a lot of good points. And I think one of the reasons I like Filoni in that position is because a lot of people were, for a long time, were being like, make Filoni the president and get rid of Kathleen Kennedy. Those people, those people, you've seen them in comments. And I genuinely, I don't think Filoni wants that job. I don't want that job for him because then Filoni's gotta be producer. He can't write anymore or direct anymore. He's got to be producer guy. He's got to.
Can I cut you off really quick and just say really quickly? And remember, Kathleen Kennedy was president of Lucasfilm in tandem with George Lucas running Lucasfilm. So even George didn't have that role.
That announcement that she was going to be taking over Lucasfilm preceded the Disney buyout. George was still in charge when he brought her on. So that dynamic has always kind of been there. And I think it's just a kind of a refocusing of that with bringing Filoni in that. But I like Filoni because, I know a lot of people, you may not enjoy Filoni's writing style. You may not enjoy his characters. Reason I like Filoni is that he has such a balanced look at Star Wars. He was one back in the day, back when, I know it seems weird now, guys, but there was a time when people really hated the prequels on the internet, guys. It wasn't a popular thing to like the prequels. It wasn't this thing where just oh yeah, you like the prequels. It was a very unpopular, you open yourself up to a lot of crap to even say anything even remotely positive about the prequels back in the day. Filoni was one of those people that was not, who was a champion of those movies, a champion of all Star Wars. I think he's someone who has a very balanced view on Star Wars and all storytelling. And he said before, he sees it all as one story. And I think we've had other storytellers in Star Wars that have not felt that way about certain movies. Cough, J.J. Abrams. And I think we need less of that and more Filoni, regardless of how you feel about his stories. He sees it as all one thing. He's the guy behind the scenes signing off on stuff like Acolyte and Andor and all these unique, different, diverse stories. I think if you want more of that, I think Filoni's your guy. I think he's going to be the one championing of that. I don't think he's going to be I'm coming in, I'm going to do all the things. No, I think there will be room for other things, and other perspectives on that. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. As proven in the past, we don't know what's going to happen next.
That's so true. And I love how we brought this news piece up as a very small piece that we just quickly chat about. We've spent 30 minutes on it. I love it.
I mean, this is huge. This is the first time we've heard anyone actually suggest that there would be multiple more Mandalorian related movies aside from the ones that were announced. This is actually a really big drop by Giancarlo Esposito.
And he's not just
reframes everything.
And he's not just some guy. He is someone who's worked closely with Filoni and Favreau. He's been behind the scenes. I think his opinion, you could say, oh, he doesn't know anything. He's just an actor. But no, I think he has a good perspective on this. And I think he knows something. I don't know if he's necessarily, teasing anything per se. I don't think we're going to have clones as the third Mando movie, but I think he's onto something here. I think there's stuff here. There's more to see. I think this is perhaps a little hint at the future of the Star Wars franchise.
So, speaking of Giancarlo Esposito, before we move on to the cool Ask the SWU questions that we want to answer, including one that has a really good picture of food. Anyway, I'm hungry now. My Giancarlo Esposito rant. I'm gonna, as I do every other week, use this show as the Disney Plus support Dropbox, because it's just easier for me to talk here. I know they're listening. I went to go look up a movie that Giancarlo Esposito was in, called Stargirl, because I realized I hadn't actually watched it. I remembered that this movie was a huge thing on Disney Plus, towards the beginning of Disney Plus being launched. It was one of their first original movies for Disney Plus, and I remember just being all over the website. Watch Stargirl. So much that I thought I had watched it. I had seen the poster for it so many times logging in to go watch Star Wars stuff that I thought, oh, of course I saw this movie. I remember, this. I remember the main actor and everything, Grace Vanderwall and all this stuff. And so, but then after watching the trailer for it, I'm like, I didn't watch that. I actually didn't watch that. I need to go back and watch that. Giancarlo Esposito is in that. The winner of America's Got Talent is in that. There's lots of other great people in that. I should go watch that. And so I go to Disney Plus, so excited to watch one of their first original Disney Plus movies. And what do I find? It's gone. Not on the website anymore.
Yeah.
Not on Disney Plus anymore.
Why?
I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is not just a random movie. This is their flagship movie that they made when they launched Disney Plus. And so I'm like, how is this? It's only been 4 years since this movie came out. It's only been 4 years. We still have the same president. What's going on? What's going on? And so I was shocked. And then I'm like, oh my God. And then I had this horrible, ominous feeling of doom come to me, which was like, did this get willowed? Is this gone forever? Am I never gonna be able to watch this movie? No. And then while I was still on the site, I'm like, I'm just gonna check on Willow. Maybe they added it back and I didn't hear about it. And then of course I look it up and the old one's on there, but not the new show. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's still hidden. Oh, this is horrible. So then I'm like, oh, this is so bad. How am I gonna watch this movie? I can't watch Willow. How am I gonna watch this? Thank goodness though, they sold the rights to a bunch of other people to rent it out. So I did have to pay, I think it was YouTube, $4 to watch Stargirl, which I did. And I was glad I did because it was a good movie. Giancarlo Esposito is great in it. Grace Vanderwall is great in it. It's a really cute movie. It's a really good family movie. Just a good general audience, quasi-musical movie. It's one of those kind of found footage musicals. I don't know how to say it, where it's they're only singing in realistic situations where you would sing in real life, not just randomly in a musical.
It's not like I'm emotional, so I have to sing.
Yeah, no. They're singing in the normal spots where you'd expect them to sing, but there's still a lot of singing. So it's kind of more like a camp rock
Oh, interesting.
But
camp rock really is the comparative here.
I think so, because am I right that they only sing in camp rock when you would actually sing because it's a music camp? And they don't sing randomly. It's just when they're singing in the music camp. Yes. So it's like that.
Only when they're on stage.
Yeah. As opposed to High School Musical, where you just randomly, Zac Efron's just on a golf course and he just starts singing.
Yeah.
Very aggressively.
You guys don't do that.
Stomping around and ruining that beautiful grass turf. They had to poor groundskeepers. But yeah. So Disney Plus, please stop. Please stop.
They took the Indiana Jones movies off the platform too this week.
Why is that? What's that reason?
This is the point. the point of Disney Plus. Remember the point of Disney Plus, guys. Remember when you were initially marketing this. Remember what it was. It was, now there's not going to be a Disney Vault anymore. Now you can get all the Disney films whenever you want. You just have to pay a subscription. We're going to pitch you so good that you guys are going to have so much faith that we're going to have a deal where you can get it for like 2 years. You can pre-purchase it for 2 years because you have faith in us. That was their original pitch.
I'll take you back even further. Remember when there was just one freaking streaming service? Remember? It was just Netflix, and you could find Disney movies and Marvel movies and freaking everything. You didn't have to sign up for 8 different services to get 8 different things. It was just one place. Yeah, it sings, and now it's everywhere, and then you still can't find everything because it's constantly moving around. And for the record, the Paramount and Disney had a deal over Disney things because they wanted the indie movies on Disney Plus while Destiny was out. Now that is up, and they're back on Paramount Plus, so you can still watch them there.
Which is not as bad.
Freaking buy them on
Which is not as bad because, I have both Paramount Plus and I have Disney Plus. So if it moves from one to the other, it's fine. I could just go on the other app. But it's the license that to either take things away, they don't go anywhere, and use it as a tax write-off, like with Willow, is absolutely egregious, absolute travesty. They should not. I'm going to complain about that repeatedly forever. And then, and I know Dominic will too. Many of us will. And then to also just license it out to get rented out too. That's pretty sucky too, because it's like you're already paying $100 a month to have 10 streaming services, and then you have to pay another $4 to just rent a movie and watch it once. What?
It still kills me that like Willow hasn't shown up on literally anywhere. Like anywhere. Like why wouldn't you put it somewhere where you could like rent it? Like, rent it or buy it or put it on Blu-ray or something. The fact that you can't, something exists. Thousands of people worked countless hours and spent millions of dollars on something, and now you just can't watch it or buy it or anywhere.
If I remember, if that report is right, and I can't remember what report I read or what the source was for this, unfortunately, but if that report or source was right, that the reason why they did this is so that they could get a rebate on their taxes. I mean, that means that it's gone forever, because it's not like they're gonna then all of a sudden give the government a bunch of money so that they can stream it again.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing WB's been doing. Like with the Batgirl movie, it was just like, oh yeah, we can get a tax write-off if we can prove that no one's watched this movie, so we're just gonna trash it. And like this movie that's made, and they're just gonna throw it. They're just gonna like throw it away or make it disappear because they don't want to have to deal with it. And it's just
okay. Pitch. Should I say it, or it's such a good idea? Maybe I shouldn't say it publicly. Imagine if you created a streaming service and the entire point of the streaming service was to buy the rights to things that had been taken off the internet just to put it on. And it's like, obviously it's going to be 100%. Very expensive. They probably got like a $10 million or like $50 million tax credit or something ridiculous like this for these things. So like, but if you had enough people signing up paying $10 a month, you could probably afford to put some of these things on that streaming service and pay the government the money to undo whatever that thing was. Like, you could. That would be an interesting pitch for a streaming service. And we kind of had that buzz of, oh, this is the special stuff. This is like, the stuff that's being resurrected from the grave. Like, it would have this cool aura to it.
It'll be like a legal black market. It would feel so fun. It would feel so exciting. Yeah. 100%.
Yes.
And then, it would be the Pirate Bay, but legal.
Yes. And then my final act as the founder with no money to actually found it of this streaming service would be to make sure I secured the posthumous rights to the George Lucas unseen films that he is making now, purportedly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would just do it in. That would do it in. If we said you could do it, a contract beforehand. You could use that as a selling point. You could be like, we literally have a contract right now with George Lucas that says that anything that he makes that he does not release after he dies, we're going to show it to you. Like, that would get 1 million people to sign up, in my opinion. I think it's a brilliant pitch.
You got my $5 a month.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Idea.
Oh wow.
Well,
Well,
that was a hell of a thing, guys. I don't know how we got all of that out of.
I told you I had a
John-
rant about Giancarlo Esposito.
Yeah.
I didn't expect
Tom,
it
I
to
don't
be
even know
that
where we
long,
started
but
with that.
yeah, jeez.
the second you said his name, I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Oh, here it comes. Here it comes. All right. Okay. So we promised we'd get to the questions. Let's get to them. Okay. Ask SWU. You've got like 2 minutes to submit a super chat if you want to submit a super chat. Okay. So you better get it on the button quick. First question comes from Giltzer10, who says, after watching Attack of the Clones, it got to be I got to thinking about the Kaminoans. Since they are the best cloners in the galaxy, do you think they genetically engineered themselves? Are they themselves clones of themselves? Do you think, I mean, like, if the Kaminoans figured out how to cloning, like, they would have tested it on themselves, right?
No, I don't think so. Because if you meet anyone from that works at McDonald's, when they first started working there, did they take advantage of getting a free Big Mac or, you know, having chicky nuggies at break time? Probably. But for the most part, they're not eating it every day. They're not like, this is my meal for the, you know, of what I'm having. And if anything, more often than not, they're like, oh, no, I can't eat Macca's. I just work there. I'm like so over the smell. I'm not going to do it. No. I feel like it'll be the same with Kaminoans. I feel like they just are very satisfied having the knowledge and being able to do it because they know it's profitable. Like, I feel like their approach to the idea of cloning even existing for them is purely like a business. We can do this for you. It's not probably something that they're like, oh, we wanted it for our race. I can imagine them being very like into like natural reproduction of themselves. I don't know how that would work for them, but like, you know, they're very just like ooey beings. I feel like they would be like ethically against cloning themselves, but they would do it for others. So that's my theory. That's my theory.
I have way too many thoughts and I'm scared to share most of them. Yeah, no, I just agree. I'm just gonna say I agree. I have lots of reasons, but I'm just gonna say that. Yeah, I don't think so. I think we would have seen a cloned Kaminoan if there were a cloned Kaminoan.
Or maybe we have already. We don't even know it.
I can tell the difference. Yes, they all are kind of blue people with long necks, but I can tell the difference between each of them. They do all look different.
Well, maybe that will be an answer. Something answered in the future, or maybe it won't because most of them are dead at later in the timeline. So probably not. Okay. Up next, we've got Vlad Sander, who comes in. He says, I have 2 questions for this week. First, do you think we may see the Nogri reemerge in season 2 of Ahsoka? In the original Heir to the Empire book series, we found out more about them. But per Rebels, we have seen but one. Rook. I cannot say it like Lars Mikkelsen. Rook. Second question isn't Star Wars related. It's actually a question about food. Here's the food thing you saw. Obviously, a certain vegan member of our esteemed host can decide to abstain from answering or change the foodstuffs. What would you rather try? An Elvis sandwich, which consists of grilled peanut butter, bacon, and banana, or a Spedissimo sandwich. Thank you for the phonetic spelling.
Spedissimo.
Spedissimo.
No. Spedissimo. He put the emphasis in the capitals.
Okay, whatever. A char-broiled and cubed chicken marinated in Italian dressing and served on a grilled pita with roasted peppers, onions, and tangy provolone. So, okay, let's answer the second question first, real quick, while we got food on the brain here. I'm getting hungry here. What are we picking? I'm not sure. Neither one of these sound good to me.
No, they both sound good. First of all, about the vegan thing, there's vegan bacon, there's vegan chicken. This is very easily made vegan. So and everything else in there is vegan, except for those things. It's very, very easy to replicate. So I've had like the banana and peanut butter thing. That's actually really good. Adding bacon to it's kind of an interesting twist, but I feel like it could work. Like I'm willing to give it a try. I think the other one, the Spirissimo, whatever, however you say, is those things sound like they would go together naturally. Like it's not like a wild card at all. So I mean, I think that's a safe choice. I think that's more likely of being better. But they both sound good. I would eat both of these things.
Yeah, the second one seems more like something you'd see on a delicatessen menu or something. Yeah, so more standard fare. But Hannah, any thoughts on this?
Anything tangy gets me.
Oh,
It
yeah.
gets me going, cooks me in.
Oh,
So,
feeling
yeah, I'll take that one.
Spirissimo.
I will say about the Elvis sandwich. I think it's pretty famous fact that like Elvis liked peanut butter and banana sandwiches. I didn't know about the bacon part of it. I have had bacon like in like sweet things. I've had I think I had like bacon flavored chocolate one time. And one thing I remember about it is that bacon on its own, great, love bacon, love me some good bacon, but bacon when it's mixed with something sweet, it's very bitter. It's a very bitter
interesting.
flavor in contrast to something sweet. It doesn't mix very well. So I'm probably gonna go with the second option. Because I mean it does have a lot of good things on it. So that's where I stand there. The Nogri.
Oh no,
We
I was gonna
had-
say real quick. I was gonna
Yeah.
say, so despite you running a restaurant in Elvis's home state, we're not to expect the Elvis sandwich coming to Rob's Barbecue on the side anytime soon.
Yeah, no, probably not gonna happen. But hey, I mean, you never know.
The Nogri.
The Nugri, the Rook. Any thoughts on things? It's funny. I heard something recently that basically that Tim Zahn was maybe trying to work around the death of Rook, and was kind of saying that maybe maybe Rook is a title more than a character.
Oh my, a mantle. It's a
so-
mantle.
So maybe
I've
we'll
heard
get
this before.
a Rook in Ahsoka season 2. I mean, I
Rook,
feel like
Rook.
What?
you're gonna-
Why is Rook this pivotal character that we need to resurrect for the sake of the stories of these great characters of this time? Why is Rook the cornerstone of this?
I
It's
mean,
definitely
look,
one of the
I think
greatest EU
the
characters.
Nogri. I think the Nogri are one of the more.
He like sprinted for like 2 episodes of Rebels, and everyone's like, "Bring him back!" What? Why?
Yeah.
What for?
The TV and the on-screen stuff has not done the Nogri justice, I don't think, as of yet. Because it's pretty compelling. Like, that relationship, them, their relationship with Leia and all that stuff, and them ultimately, spoiler alert, turning on Thrawn in the end. It's interesting. So I don't know. Will they tackle that in the movies? Is it things? I mean, obviously there's a lot going on there, and is it going to be something that they, is it going to be like, oh, we're going to copy this from the books, or are we going to change it? Because it seems like this is not Heir to the Empire 2.0. This is something completely different, just with similar characters.
Yeah. Once we get something in animation, I feel like we're gonna keep getting it again and again because they just have the model. So that's why I think we'll get more Nogri just
Because he showed up in
economics.
Tales of the Empire. So
Yeah. We'll just keep
Just
getting.
like
I
that.
think we'll get random
one's-
Nogri in the background of cantinas. And
I will say
snack
Nogri
table.
are a lot smaller than I envisioned them while reading the books.
True.
I don't know. Maybe that was always a thing, but just like he's a little guy, he's a little alien guy, kind of short. He's short king.
Range and size.
Yeah.
Very.
Okay. Another non-Star Wars question. I got you guys going on this. Okay. We said anything goes here. So Joel Davis coming in with the last question. Something, Hannah, I'm gonna throw this to you first because I think you were looking for this last week. He says, thoughts on the Rings of Power season 2 now that it's over. I believe you've seen all of it. So what's your take?
I have literally as of this morning. I watched it at like 7 a.m. for some reason because I couldn't sleep in. So I was just like, you know what? I'll just crank it out now. Yes, I put this on Twitter as well. I give it an 8.5 out of 10 the whole season. Very much enjoyed it. The only part of the show that I just could not care less about is the whole Gandalf Nori storyline that's happening throughout the show. Cannot connect with it. Do not vibe it. I just don't like the pacing, how they're telling it. I just cannot enjoy that whatsoever. Everything else, on the other hand, everything in Numenor, everything with Galadriel, Sauron, like everything else, sublime. I've enjoyed it so much. Yeah, I think it's excellent, and that finale was really quite good. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it. 8.5.
I think I'm like halfway through at this point. It's a pretty long, like the episodes are pretty long, so I'm kind of
they're decent. It's like a movie. It's a movie per episode.
It's taken some time to get through it because I haven't had a day to just like sit and watch it all day, but it might happen. But yeah, I'm kind of flipped with you on that. Like I think I like the Nori stuff better than the Numenor stuff.
No way.
Yeah, but again, I'm halfway through. So maybe it changes.
Maybe
it changes. So we'll see. But I love the Galadriel stuff. Like Galadriel is that's my favorite part of that show. I think they've done an amazing job with the writing of her character.
Right. I just watched the third from last episode, so I'm 2 episodes behind. So I haven't got to the finale. I'm not finished quite yet, but I've seen most of it and I really enjoy it. My only comment that I will say right now, is that this show is doing a good job of it, but also is getting to the point where like there's so much going on and like there's literally so many storylines in this show and so many characters that you will go like they can only squeeze so many into this freaking hour-plus episode. Sometimes you won't see the dwarves for a whole episode. You won't see the stranger and Nori for a whole episode because they're just left out because they have to deal with all the other stuff or what everyone else is doing. And I feel like, to me, in a second season, it's getting a little, I don't know, stretched in regards to. Yeah.
Ben says this as someone who hasn't sat down and watched the whole Game of Thrones series.
Right. Yeah.
Which is like that times 10.
But like, I like season 1 of Rings of Power because it was like, oh, it's some of these characters, but then okay, the Numenor, Galadriel, and the Numenor stuff they intersect towards the end. And that was really good. It was really satisfying. Whereas this season's like, it's still kind of like, okay, everyone's spread out again. Numenor people, they went back to their island. They're doing their thing. They got their own problems. And we're just following them along. And it doesn't seem like they're going to actually intersect anymore. So like, I'm like, okay, I want more connectivity. It's a lot to follow and take in and be invested in all those because I think I am more in line with your camp of Hannah. I'm just like, some storylines, I'm like, I really like what's going on with Galadriel. I like what's going on with the dwarves. I like what's going on, obviously, with Sauron and Celebrimbor.
Oh, Celebrimbor, yeah, he's been such a standout this season.
Yeah.
Oh.
But then other times, I'm like, okay, where's this whole Nori halfling thing going? Where is that going? Like, I'm not disinterested. I'm just kind of curious. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see how the next 2 episodes shake out and how anything connects. But again, props to Amazon. They're like, we're writing this out 5 seasons. We could give, if no one's watching this, we're still gonna invest $1 billion in this thing and make this. So like, I'm all for it.
If anyone has more money than Disney, it is Amazon. I mean, I feel like they are like building a rocket ship to Uranus or something. But
that sounds like an insult.
It is. I want to mention. I just because Matthew Hardy left us a comment saying that he missed Howard Shore's score beats and Rings of Power, and he felt the Siege of Eregion just felt flat, less inspired compared to Helm's Deep and Planetary Fields. The only reason why I brought this up is because I just want to say nothing. I could not imagine anything ever comparing to Helm's Deep, ever. I only say that because I don't have very often opportunities to say that because I don't do Lord of the Rings podcasts. But I will say that Helm's Deep, I feel like, is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, battle sequence ever filmed in the history of cinema, between the acting, the writing, the editing, the score, the effects.
Absolutely.
So there's literally, yes, of course it doesn't hold up, but I don't think anything would. In my
I've this is the last thing I'll say this. I've realized that I'm a very bad music critic. Like I went through the process with all the sequel movies and Rogue One and Solo, going out of the theater going like, oh, I didn't really notice the music. I think the music kind of sucked. And then, ending up loving the music and being like, okay, that's just how my brain, like the first time I watched these things, I don't catch the music. It really takes multiple viewings and me kind of paying attention to the music to actually like really soak it in. And it's always things like, Matthew, you perfectly, within your right to have that opinion. And I think if you say, well, Howard Shore scores better, but that's no surprise. But I think also you have to consider we've all sat with that music for 20 plus years, and this is brand new. Kind of have to give it a little bit of time. Because Bear McCreary, he's no Howard Shore, but damn, he's got a good ear and very talented in his own right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like probably the only reason why I would say that overall the Star Wars film score is better than Lord of the Rings is just because there's more of it.
And also, I'm biased.
Yeah, but really, I mean, it's right up there. Howard Shore's right up there with John Williams in those, in my opinion. I feel like the score for Lord of the Rings is immaculate.
Absolutely. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I was gonna say that's the last. That is the last question. We've made it. So that'll conclude this episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We want to thank everybody so much for watching, for listening to the show. And as always, we would be so incredibly remiss to not end the show without plugging Instagram's exciting new texting app Threads. At the SWU is where you can follow us on Threads, the only social media site that we are really on.
Hey, we're 6,800 guys. Get us to 7,000 followers on Threads. Get us closer to not having to post on the other site, maybe.
That's right. So check us out there at the SWU. Ben, thank you so much for hosting tonight.
Oh, this was a pleasure as always. I mean, as we said off the top, it really, to lose such a legend like Robert Watts is what it really, really sucks. And the news was really tough to get. But this was an uplifting experience. I think revisiting that interview. Thanks so much to Tom for sharing that with us. And really helps remember him as he was, and what the legend that he was, and the talent that he was, the personality that he was, and just it's not just obviously, it reminds you that not only a lot of talented people working behind the scenes Star Wars, a lot of really good, kind-hearted people that made this thing what it is. So really sad to see him go, but glad to remember him for who he was. And hats off to Robert Watts. Thank you so much for freaking making our lives, my dude. It's been great. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say. That's it. Okay, I'm just gonna shut up now. Bye.
At Ben Hart with no E is where you can follow Ben on social media. Hannah, thank you so much for hosting too.
Thank you so much. Another great discussion going down the rabbit holes we love to go down. But yeah, another great week. Remembering a great man and also just having a good time talking about Star Wars and what is to come of it. Very, very exciting. Good times ahead. But yeah, thanks. Good times.
Awesome. And you can find more good times over at the Raeside. Check it out. R-A-E side is how Ray is spelled, not like the Star Wars Ray. You'll get Daisy Ridley's YouTube channel if you do the other one. So, which is not very active. So check out the Raeside for more of Hannah. You can follow me on social media at Seek3PO, and of course Dominic at Dominic J25. Check out all the other shows on our network. In addition to the Raeside, we got Iron Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. On your way out of here, do not forget to click that link. It's right here. It's right with this video. If you haven't clicked it, click it. Join our Discord. It's awesome. We got lots.
We're not asking anymore. Click it.
And that's where the SWU questions come from. That's where the questions about if you'd rather the Elvis sandwich or the zesty tangy sandwich comes from. So.
It doesn't have to be during the show. It doesn't have to be any specific time. Literally 24/7. It's 365. Drop a question in there. We will read it eventually on the show.
Check us out. Don't forget to subscribe. Become a channel member on your way out as well. We'll be back in 7 days with more of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. But until then, for Dominic and Ben and Hannah, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you. It's a wrap.